Ooh, my favorite pair of socks I've ever knit. That's a tough one. Hello. My name is Emily Crow from Crochet Creations. Welcome to my YouTube channel, and I wanted to share all about my experience knitting socks. I have been knitting for a little over a year now. I started my sock knitting journey this time last year, so it has been 1 full year of knitting socks. And so to celebrate, I made a video, my sock parade, where I showed off every single sock that I knit in my first year of knitting socks. I talked about what yarns I used, what patterns I followed, if any, what I learned from that experience, just overall my experience of knitting socks for a year, and all the growth that has come to my knitting because of it. So you can watch that video. I'll link it up above. That's part 1, and I'll link it down below as well. This is part 2. I ended up deciding to split this video up. The first video, I talk about all my socks and show them all, and in this video, part 2, I respond to some questions from my Instagram followers about my sock knitting experience. So I can go into more detail about the different types of socks I've knit, my favorites, things like that. Definitely stick around so you can learn more about those and hear my answers that I have for you. Alright, so let's get into the questions that some of my Instagram followers asked me regarding socks. I think that this would be so fun to share. So first and foremost, what is my vanilla sock recipe? So here we go. Vanilla sock, 64 stitch count. I do a 20 row cuff of 2x2 rib. I typically do a 40 round leg in addition to the cuff, so 60 rounds total. This is a little bit longer. I do a heel flap and gusset, just a traditional work the heel flap on exactly half the sock. I pick up 16 stitches along the heel flap. When I do my gusset, decrease every other round, nothing too fancy, and then I do 45 rounds beyond the gusset on my sock foot, and then I do a modified wedge toe. So for that, for about 10 rounds, I alternate every other round in decreases, and once I get to 40 stitches total that I have left on my needles, then I'll start decreasing every round until I get to, I don't know, maybe like 16 stitches, 18 stitches, I can't quite remember, for about another like 5 rounds. And so that is my vanilla sock recipe. My best wearing socks. I will say I don't normally wear my socks in shoes or going outside, things like that. But I will say my best pairing wear of socks, I will say that my best wearing pair of socks would be my Loops and Threads Perfect Pair socks, which is funny because they are non-wool, but they hold up so well that you would not really guess that I've worn these as much as I have, being that I've had these socks for a whole year. I think they hold up really, really well. I have no concern about there getting holes in them or anything, and I don't find them more sweaty than other socks that I own that have like a wool content or something. So I think those are my best wearing socks that I have made. My wash routine, I like to use wool wash. I've got some from Sorella. It's just a liquid soap, and it's got lanolin as well as like a nice smelling scent in it. It'll have instructions on the bottle, so super easy. But basically what I do is I have like a pot on my stove or something, or like a bigger bowl that I put some lukewarm water in, and then I put like a dash or 2 of soap, like not very much, less than a teaspoon for sure, and then I mix that around. The water should turn kind of milky. I put my socks in, and then make sure they're all soaked in there. Leave them for at least 20 minutes. Sometimes I've left them for longer if I forget about them, but usually I set a timer so that I don't forget about them overnight or anything, but I can get them out and get them started drying. After I wash them, and this is whether I'm blocking them for the very first time or even washing them after wearing them, I'll do the same exact procedure. So then I pull them out of the water, I squeeze them, I don't wring them out, I just squeeze the excess moisture out, I lay them on a dish towel, and then I'll roll up the dish towel so it's like a little log, and then I'll press that and squeeze that. If I'm doing a lot and I'm using a bigger towel, I might use my feet to squish on it to try to get some excess moisture out. Once I've done that, then I will open up the dish towel and take out the socks, put them on my blockers, and then I'll hang this up in my shower, on the shower curtain rod, so that they can dry. Sometimes I'll turn the fan on in my bathroom, other times not. It just gets them some good airflow. With these blockers that I will link down below, I really like them. I think the wooden blockers are so pretty, but I think these work so well because I can hang them on things, and they're so open that I think that my socks dry really, really fast. If I'm not blocking them and just washing them, then I may lay them out just to dry on like a blocking mat or a towel or something. But if I'm just doing like my first block, or if I'm only washing one pair of socks, then I'll use my blockers. Favorite heel. So you will see I have a lot of heel flap and gusset. I feel like they fit really well to my foot. They're comfortable and they're not too tight or anything. And so I've really enjoyed working heel flap and gusset. I do want to branch out and try other heel styles, but especially working top down, I really do love heel flap and gusset. Which brings me to the next question, cuff down or toe up? And you'll see from the numbers that I like cuff down socks more. I didn't want to just be like everybody else and like cuff down socks more, but I have some good reasons. Number one, I hate gusset increases. Like I said, if you're doing gusset increases in a toe up sock, you are increasing your stitch count every other round or so. And so each round gets longer and longer and longer, and it just drags on, and I just hated that. I hate that. Even when I did my arrate socks that weren't the same construction, they still increased on the leg before I got to the heel. And so even though they were cuffed down, it felt so long to work this gusset increase. It was such a pain in the butt. I really did not like it. So that's one reason that I like cuff down socks better, is because instead of increasing for the gusset, I am picking up stitches really quickly, and then I'm just decreasing every round, so every round gets faster and faster. So I really like that process more. And then another reason that I really like cuff down socks is because I find it much easier to do a nice looking stretchy cast on than a nice looking stretchy bind off that fits well and is not too tight. To fit all of what you want in a stretchy bind off or cast on, I feel like I have an easier time casting on. My favorite cast on currently is a German twisted cast on, because it's basically just one more step beyond a regular long tail cast on, but I like the edge finish a lot better. It is nice and stretchy, so it works really well for socks. So I've really liked the German twisted cast on. And I guess on the other hand, I do want to have more practice with toe up socks, but I do find that the Kitchener stitch where I graft my toe close on a cuff down sock, I really enjoyed that process. I love doing a Kitchener stitch, and I've never had to look it up because I just enjoy it so much that I like really caught on, and I keep doing socks that use a Kitchener, and so I really love the Kitchener stitch. But compared to a toe up sock where you use Judy's Magic Cast On, I find is a little bit more fiddly because I'm not as used to it. I don't dislike it necessarily, but I always have to have the YouTube video in front of me to work on, whereas a Kitchener stitch, I've committed to memory because I'm just a lot more comfortable with it, and it's a lot more rhythmic, and I just enjoy the process. I could Kitchener all day if I had to. My favorite yarn blend, I would have to say I think 80-20 superwash merino and nylon, but I have not tried very many blends. I know that there's lots of different types of non-superwash blends out there that I really want to try. As far as blends I've tried before, I've tried a 75-25, which is not quite as plush of a base from what I've tried, and so my gauge turns out a little differently, and the yarn just feels like thinner to me, which I don't necessarily enjoy as much, but it doesn't make too much of a difference. And then as far as like a merino cashmere nylon base, I've always wanted to try, but I have not. I feel like that would be very luxurious. Have not tried it. So I say my favorite blend is 80-20, but I haven't tried very much else. I don't have a lot of experience, so that's not a hard and fast rule for me. As far as like what contrasts I like all the contrasts. I have a hard time choosing, and so even you'll see I didn't have enough yarn to do a full ribbed cuff, and so I just did like a little contrast at the cuff and then a heel and a toe. I like that a lot. Other socks, I've done a toe and cuff, and you know, if I could have, I would have done a heel, because I just like how it looks. I feel like it's well-rounded. That would be my ultimate, is doing all the contrasts. And I guess I'll say this when it comes to like contrast colors, I love having coordinating colors, you know, on a color wheel, like yellow and purple contrast. So I wouldn't enjoy putting yellow and purple in the same sock as a contrast. I'd rather if the purple had like some flecks of pink in it, that I have a pink contrast color, so that the colors tied together and so it coordinated better, not as much of a contrast. So you'll see that this caramel color, there's some little flecks of like a brown that kind of matches, so I like that. Or, you know, this one, I have flecks of green in the hand-dyed yarn that I tried to match with this green. Or this color, you know, like there's this minty color speckled throughout, and so I wanted them to coordinate. rather than totally contrast, if that makes sense. I know some dyers like to pair very contrasting colors, like from opposite sides of the color wheel in their sock sets, and I do not enjoy knitting with those because I'm a very color coordinated type of person. I like my colors to match very, very well, which I guess means I'm not very adventurous in my color matching. Favorite sock length? I think my favorite length, like a 50 to 60 round total leg, so that's including the cuff. So it's like in between an ankle sock and a mid-calf sock. It's about that much. So not a super long sock, but definitely more than an ankle sock. Ideally, I would have made this leg a little bit longer in retrospect, because I do like a little bit longer socks than that, but I don't like a super long sock. So like these ones definitely have a little bit too long of a leg for me. My favorite needle method, and this has also changed, I wanted to be a 9-inch circular person, and I'm still trying to get more comfortable with it, but I have found that I enjoy magic loop the best, because if you use a 9-inch circular needle, then you definitely have to switch, like 100%, you have to switch your needle out when you do the toe of your sock. It's impossible with a 9-inch circular. And you can also use your 9-inch circular for your heel, but sometimes it feels easier to use magic loop or something else, so you might switch it for that point too. And so I don't like having to switch my needles out, to be honest. I like how magic loop, it's more versatile in terms of being able to not have to switch around my needle in and out in order, like, to change my method, I guess, where you have to do that for 9-inch circular. DPNs I feel like are really fiddly, and I do want to get more comfortable with them, but I want to get better at working on DPNs, but I need a lot of practice with that. I find them fiddly, and it's easier to drop your stitches on the ends of your needles, whereas magic loop gives you a lot of extra cord that you can slide your stitches onto when you're like putting your knitting down, for example. That makes it easier to not lose your stitches. Same thing with a 9-inch circular, because your circumference is so small with your stitches jam-packed on there, it's easier to, you know, have your needle slide out and lose 10 stitches, and that's just a pain in the butt. So even though I know how to fix that, I'd rather not. So I'd say magic loop is my favorite method at the moment, because it's most versatile and safest to work on without disasters happening. Favorite socks pattern. I will say that I really enjoyed working on the daily socks. I love that it's a subtle texture. It doesn't outshine the variegated yarn at all, but it was fun to work on because it's mostly vanilla and just a little bit different. I really enjoyed that. Not that I think I would work on another pair of these socks right away, but I could definitely see myself making another pair of daily socks. Favorite tutorials. This one is a little hard. I don't have great recommendations. I know that Knitty Natty has some tutorials. I know that the Crazy Sock Lady has some tutorials, though hers are pretty long to watch, and I don't really want to watch a 40-minute tutorial on socks, but I've just searched a lot. And my number one tip for finding tutorials that work for you is watching lots of tutorials. Even though there are a lot of knitters out there, there's many ways to knit and many ways to think about and to actually do these things in knitting. And so if one method's not working for you, then switch to another video and see how theirs is, how they set things up, how they talk about things, how they visualize. Everyone is a little bit different, and so you'll find a match that really works with your style of knitting and with your brain and with your hands, so that you can tackle any techniques that you are looking for tutorials for. So definitely keep trying. Don't just watch one person's tutorial and think that that is the way to do it. Watch a lot of tutorials until you figure it out, because there's lots of tutorials out there. I know the Very Pink Knits has a lot of small tutorials for specific techniques that are really good, so I always turn to hers if I'm wanting to do like just a quick little technique. The Chili Dog also has a lot of quick technique videos, and by quick it's not like a YouTube short or anything, but a shorter length video, maybe 10 minutes long, to help you learn specific techniques, and so I think that's really helpful too. I've really enjoyed her tutorials, but I'm not quite sure how many she has related specific for sock knitting. Beginning pattern. My favorite beginning pattern, I would say Summerly Knits. Her So Basic socks are a really great pattern for beginners. I mean, it was the second pair of socks I ever made were from her pattern. She includes a lot of description and teaching related to knitting your first pair of socks that makes it really easy to figure out how to make it fit well, how to choose the right yarn, what all those numbers mean. It's really great for beginners, so I would definitely recommend that. And it's free, which is very handy. It's free to get the PDF version from her website, so I would definitely recommend that as a beginning pattern. She's got a lot of other patterns that are really fun, as far as like lots of colorwork patterns. Also, the daily socks are another more beginner friendly pattern. I would say not necessarily great for your first pair of socks. I would recommend a vanilla sock pattern of some sort, but that would be great for a second pair of socks. for sure. Really simple. Then this last question, how to get your perfect fit for a pair of socks. Follow one of those pattern tutorials. Like in Summer Lee's So Basic Sock Pattern, she talks about math. She talks about figuring out sizes. She talks about measuring. So do all those steps to figure out your measurements and how to fit your socks, and that'll be a really great starting point for making sure your socks fit well. I would say be consistent with your gauge. Don't work on a sock for a month and then put it down for 3 months and then pick it back up again and expect your gauge to be the same, because it probably won't. I've learned my lesson the hard way. So try to be consistent, and even if you're not finishing the sock in a week, you know, work on it regularly every few days so that it's more likely that you'll finish the sock in a timely way and that your gauge won't change too much. Also, I guess another point with gauge, making sure that you're not necessarily working on the sock at different times of the day. Like, you might be really stressed watching an action movie at night, like working on stitches, you might knit really tight, versus like if you work on it for 30 minutes in the morning before your kids wake up, you might knit really, really relaxed and sleepily, and so your gauge might be a lot bigger. So try to knit at a time when your gauge can be regular or knit at the same time every day so your gauge is consistent. I think that's a big tip. And then just practice making multiple socks. I have a lot of socks that don't fit me perfectly, and I still wear them because they work well. I normally wear my socks to bed to keep my toes nice and toasty. Socks that don't fit perfectly still work great for that. So I recommend just making lots of socks. If you find that a pair is a little too long, then next time make your pair a little shorter. You can keep track of what you've done previously on socks, or even pull out your old sock and count your rows if you can't remember how many rows you did, if you want to change something. Try to improve each one. If it's fitting a little too loose, maybe try a smaller stitch count or a smaller needle size. If it's fitting too tight, then maybe, you know, switch to more stitches or a bigger needle size. Trial and error, which I know is not a great answer. That might be the answer you want, but just trial and error and make changes every time you make a sock to see what you would want to do better until you get the perfect sock for you. And I'm still constantly learning and changing and growing in my sock making skills. This is all just what I've learned in my first year of knitting and my experience in knitting socks for a year, and I've learned so much and grown so much and found so much joy in knitting socks, but there is still plenty more to come in the future. So I think that is everything. Thank you so much for hanging out with me as I gushed about socks. I'm so glad I started the journey of learning how to knit socks, and I've learned so much already. I've even designed my own pattern, and I have many more coming. I have lots of ideas on my plate as far as new techniques I want to try and things that I want to learn. Definitely keep an eye out. I'm going to come out with a new video about Summer Sock Camp 2022 and my plans and goals for knitting socks for this summer, because I have lots of plans and goals now that I am proficient at knitting socks. Lots and lots of plans and goals. So I'll share that soon with you, so keep an eye out for that. And I have some design ideas in mind of other socks that I want to see come into the world, and so keep an eye out for that as well. Thank you so much for being here. If you enjoy this type of content, I like to talk about all things knitting, crochet, and fiber related. So if you'd like to join me, I would love to have you. Definitely make sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're notified whenever I post a new video. And comment down below if you have knit any of these patterns. I love to see what other people have made. Let me know what your favorite sock patterns are, especially if it's one I haven't tried before, because I always like trying something new. I just love having conversations down there, especially about socks. So let me know down below if there's something you want to share with me so that we can chat down there, and I will see you next time. Happy making. Bye.